Probably the worst story I've ever heard, and whether it be the cartels, whether it be the black drug gangs, whether it be the Italians, was the Action Jackson story with Mad Sam Destefano, was another guy from our neighborhood. Yeah. Location for Chicago's Little Italy was Taylor Street. Taylor Street, back in the day, there was a lot of Italians that lived in the city on the west side of Chicago. Taylor Street had a gang called the 42 Gang because there was 42 members. Now that gang today, as we look back in history, that gang was somewhat of a who's who, an all-star, Hall of Fame for the Chicago outfit. Guys like Sam Giancana, who's involved in the Kennedy assassination and involved with the CIA on hits on Castro. Fifi Buccieri, who was maybe the second most insane man, the most sadistic man to come out of that area. But the most sadistic man I'm talking about in all of gangster lore, whether it be the cartels or whether it be the black street gangs and drug organizations, the most sadistic man I've ever read about, the most sadistic man I've ever heard about, is a man by the name of Mad Sam Destefano. Now, Mad Sam Destefano lived in this house. It's commonly said that Mad Sam had a house in Elmwood Park, that this house is in Elmwood Park, but this house is not in Elmwood Park. Like I said in other videos, Elmwood Park is on the other side of Harlem Avenue. Harlem Avenue divides Chicago from Elmwood Park. And so if you saw me in the bank robbery video, the reason I knew something was going on is because I was driving down Harlem and I saw two officers from the Elmwood Park side, Elmwood Park officers, run across the street hurriedly into Chicago. And it was like 2 o'clock on a Monday. It didn't make sense that they were running out of their jurisdiction into another jurisdiction. So that's what made me go around the block and stop. And when I went around the block, of course, the guy had the huge gun, the guy I grew up with, and he said, "Hey, get out of here." Anyway, so this is Mad Sam Destefano, the most sadistic gangster I've ever read about. And I'm not saying there was people that were more cunning and more maniacal as far as being intelligent and ruthless, but this guy was just insane. So this is his house here. He built a torture chamber in the basement. In the basement, he built a torture chamber with soundproof walls, so you couldn't hear anything. Mad Sam led a crew, and he was never actually inducted into the outfit. He was just too deranged. You could not control him. There was a story in which Charles Cromaldi, a hitman who was part of the Destefano crew, talked about Sam rolling around on the garage floor with foam coming out of his mouth while he was yelling to Satan, "I'll do whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want. I am your tool. Use me as your vessels." Stuff of that nature. He was said to be a satanic worshiper. Mad Sam Destefano would hold meetings right there in his garage. Now, in the 50s, when he first started, he'd bring his brothers Michael and Mario around the mob to begin with. But it was Mario who was the only one to actually become an outfit member. His younger brother, Michael, got into drugs bad. He kept on screwing up the money. It got so bad that outfit leaders came to Mad Sam and told him, "Michael's got to go." So Mad Sam killed his own brother. Mad Sam killed his brother Michael. And then he washed the body as a symbolic way of washing the dope off of him. And he put him in a trunk of a car, but he made sure that the body was found quickly, and he did not shoot him in the head or the face so they could have an open casket funeral. So they made sure he found him quickly so they could have a funeral for him. And when they found him, the clothes were still wet because Sam had stripped him naked and washed him as a symbolic way of washing off the dope. Parts of Mad Sam's crew were Toni Spilotro, We did the video on him and his brother getting lured. That was Joe Pesci in Casino again. But a lot of things happened in this garage. They had meetings in the garage. Obviously, the basement. Mad Sam killed a man by the name of Albert Adler. Albert Adler owned the Four Winds on Rush Street, a bar. Down on Rush Street in Chicago, that is like the entertainment district where they have the very fancy restaurants, the clubs. When I was in my 20s, I would go down there clubbing. And they got a spot down there called the VIAGRA Triangle. It's where the really rich men go, and the really young girls go to find really rich men. They call it the VIAGRA Triangle. Hugo's Frog Bar, Morton's Steakhouse, places like that. This is the back of Sam's house. But Anthony Spilotro was taught from Mad Sam Destefano. Now, the outfit was known to always get things right. That they were the family that always got things right. And there was not all this killing in Chicago like there was in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, Nicodemo Scarfo, little Nickey Scarfo, would kill you at the drop of a hat. He was killing people left and right. The Colombo family in New York there's 5 families. The Colombo families were constantly at war. I can think of 2 wars they were in off the top of my head. And then there was bosses getting hit, like Albert Anastasia.
When Anastasia got killed in the barber shop, it was Russell.
Joey Gallo and Carmine Persico went into the hotel where Albert Anastasia, who was Lord High Executioner, the head of Murder Incorporated, would always get he would always get a haircut and shaved on like a Tuesday, and they went in there and murdered him on the orders of CARLO Gambino. CARLO Gambino is the head of the Gambino family. So they killed the head of Murder Incorporated in New York. And then there was also the huge hit, another Gambino hit of Paul Castellano, because after CARLO Gambino died, he gave it to his brother-in-law, Paul Castellano. He gave the family to him, but John Gotti felt like it should have went to the underboss, who was who taught him, who showed him the ropes. That gentleman's name is
Emilio Della Croce.
Now, anyways, so Albert Adler was he was kidnapped and tortured here at the house, and then a William Romer, who was an FBI agent, would repeatedly come to this house, and they would argue, and he'd say, "What did you do with Albert Adler? What did you do with Mr. Adler?" And he would insist he didn't do anything. Mad Sam would, and he'd call his family in, and he'd say, my family gets struck with cancer if I did anything. And this Romer guy kept on coming back. He found out later that he was being served tea, or coffee, I'm sorry, and Mad Sam was urinating in the coffee. Mad Sam was insane. Hey, sir, do you know whose house this is? This house?
Yeah, it's my house.
I'm saying, but do you know who used to own it?
Yeah, my family had for the last 20...
Before that?
Yeah, historically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just telling the story. Yeah, no. Okay. So, I'm sorry? Do you have I could just look in real quick?
I don't.
Oh my God, dude, I'd actually pay you to look in the garage.
No, it doesn't look anything like TV. We haven't changed it, just full of junk, but...
Well, let's say, so in the basement, is there any reminiscence like a soundproof basement or anything?
Yeah, so there's a cold room, and then there's like an old sauna, like completely,
When you say sauna, you mean?
Like a real sauna with all original wood and everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? But could you see that the walls were like soundproof at one time?
Yeah, oh yeah, the paneling downstairs before we paneled over everything was just so old the way it was, but yeah, I mean, it was...
Did you see any other weird things in there?
full bar in the basement, man. It was quite the setup back in the day.
My man, this is Disorderly Product News. Look online, Disorderly Product News. I do mob stories. I do other stories. Disorderly Product News. I'll put it on there.
Yeah, no problem.
My man, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. So there you go. That's the owner right there. You heard what he said. So where were we at? Now, this part of this story, I got to say it again so I can say it correctly. Peter Capitelli took off to Milwaukee, and he had stolen $25,000 from Mad Sam Destefano. Now, that $25,000, he wanted back, obviously. So Mario and Chucky Grimaldi, a man who ended up turning a hitman in the Destefano crew, he ended up turning, and but at the time he had not turned yet. So they went and they kidnapped him from Milwaukee. They found him in Milwaukee. They kidnapped him. They bring him back to Mario's restaurant, where Mad Sam was at. They had him in the basement, chained up, tied up, and he was left down there while Sam held a banquet in his honor. So Sam called up the family of this Peter Capitelli, and he said, we're gonna have a banquet for your husband, for your sons, for your brother's honor. And they came, and while they were eating, Mad Sam took the microphone, and he announced the man of honor was here, the man that they were throwing the party for, Mr. Peter Capitelli. In which time Peter Capitelli was wheeled in, chained to a radiator, they said. He was chained to the radiator in the basement, unchained to the radiator, but still chained, whether he was chained to a gurney, he was chained to something. So he was chained, they bring him in chained, naked, in front of his whole family, sitting around at what they thought was a banquet in his honor. And it's rumored that he made members of that family urinate on Peter in order to set him free. Peter was set free, and obviously he came back with $50,000 within that week. The family came up with $50,000. I mean, you would think that the guy's not playing around with something like that. Now, if that's not one of the most sadistic things you ever heard, and that actually happened. I mean, that's not rumor. They threw a party for him, and halfway through the party, they bring up Peter, who was chained up, naked, with bruises and cuts and burn marks. Now, it was one thing that Frank, if you remember, Frank Calabrese said, there was something about the Chicago mob. This is getting back to the people, the killing and stuff before I came. The Chicago mob, like other mobs, the outfit were into torture. Now, the reason why the Chicago mob tortured is to put people in line so they didn't have to kill, right? So if you heard about, you know, some of these most hideous tortures that people like Mad Sam and Fifi and other guys did, you really hard pressed to get out of line. Now, if there's a couple of bullets fly at you and you get in the head, you don't know it, you're dead. But Chicago kept their guys in line and became so powerful because they did torture. And they never let, like, I hate to say it, but they never let a good torture go to waste. So probably the most famous case of torture all time in probably in U.S. history, definitely in outfit history, was when Mad Sam kidnapped Action Jackson. Action Jackson was a part of the crew. He was a bookmaker, but it had been rumored that Action Jackson went bad and was talking to the feds. They took him to a meat processing plant. And you know those big hooks that they put the hunks of meat on? You see in Rocky when he's punching the hunks of meat, the cattle or whatever, the carcasses of the cattle. Action Jackson was about 300 pounds. They hung him on a hook through his anus. They impaled him through his anus, and then they started burning him with a blowtorch. They put an ice pick through his ear. They started cutting him, and they caved in his chest. There was even rumors that they took a really thin beaker. You know those beakers you had in science class, like the really, really thin ones? And they put it in his, the hole in front of him, midway through his body where he urinates out of. They put it up there and in there, and then they took their hands and they clapped with that organ being in the middle of the clap. So obviously that thin glass broke inside of him. they hung him up there, and they started using a cattle prod on his that same organ and on the backside of him. They dosed him in water so the cattle prod would electrify him even worse. And he lived for 3 days. They either stayed overnight there or they just came and kept on coming back until he died. He died of, he didn't die, he died of just pain. He survived for 3 days. He was never an informant. He wasn't telling on anybody. But there's a lot of stories behind that. Now, it's said that Action Jackson may have raped a connected guy's wife, right? There's a story like that. There's also a story that he stole. And the stories are that Tony Accardo said, make an example out of him. You know, if you kill one guy like that, you don't have to kill 20 others. And that was one thing that the Chicago outfit always did. So Chicago did it in a way that they tortured, and that's the thing that Frank says. He says there's something about Chicago guys. They were into torture, and that's why it was to keep people in line. It was very, very methodical. They thought it out. Like Frank says, the whole month of August 1986, they planned the John Feccarata hit. Him, Frank Calabrese Jr., Frank Calabrese Sr., and Nick Calabrese. So Frank Calabrese Sr. and Nick Calabrese are brothers. Frank Jr., the one I interviewed, is the son. So how Mad Sam Destefano died is he was on trial for Chucky Grimaldi the hit guy turned, and he was on trial at the Dirksen Federal Building. You'll see the pictures of him with the bullhorn on a stretcher, yelling through the bullhorn while he's being carried in on a stretcher. He was his own attorney. He was insane, and they realized, you know, the bosses, whether it be Joey Aiuppa or Tony Accardo, whoever it was at the time, probably Tony Accardo or Sam Giancana, decided that he had to go. You know, he's on trial. Him and Toni Spilotro are on trial. So how he ends up dying is they say they found Chucky Grimaldi. They said they found him. They found where he's hiding. That's what Mario, his brother, says. Now remember, this guy killed his other brother, but he says we know where Chucky's hiding at, and Anthony Spilotro and Mario come here. Right? They park. They're walking up to the garage. Mario is in front of Anthony. Anthony's a small guy. Well, they get this garage door's open. They're walking up over here. When they get to, they're probably walking down the sidewalk, actually right here. Sam's in the garage. Sam's coming out of the garage. Mario jumps out of the way, and Anthony was right behind him. Anthony, right, while Mario was in front of him, was because Anthony had a double-barrel shotgun. He let loose. The first shot tore off Mad Sam's left arm at the elbow. His second shot hit him in the chest, and he died right there. His brother set him up. Obviously, his brother was involved. The bosses came and said, your brother's got to go. And Mario, being sadistic himself, said, okay. And Anthony, being taught by Mad Sam, you had no problem shooting somebody. I mean, these guys torture people. To shoot them with a shotgun, that's like a walk in the park. So they killed him, and Mad Sam died right here. Mad Sam's body was dead, laid out right there.